Alright guys, buckle up, because today we're diving into the chaos of the US-China showdown. And trust me, this story is not about to end the way Washington wants you to believe. Trump's trade war is unraveling. His so-called economic battlefield is slipping right through his fingers. And while America is busy waving tariffs like a weapon, China, India, Russia, they're playing a completely different game. One that might leave the US isolated, cornered, and begging for a way out. So let's break this down. By the end of this video, you'll see why America's tariff war might just go down in history as one of the biggest strategic miscalculations of the century. Let's start with Russia. Washington tried to cut Moscow's oil lifeline, right? The idea was simple: strangle Russian revenue and force Putin to his knees. But here's the problem. Russia didn't fold. In fact, almost 3 million barrels of crude oil are still moving every single day, straight into India and China. Think about that. Trump hits India with a 25% tariff, but what happens? Indian companies just reroute shipments. They resell oil. They make $16 billion in profits. And China? Well, Beijing doesn't even blink. Before the Ukraine war, about 13% of China's oil came from Russia. Today it's 16%. They diversified, they secured their energy, and they're fine. So the big American plan to starve Russia? Total bust. Instead of isolating Moscow, Washington just pushed Russia deeper into the arms of Beijing and New Delhi. And here's where it gets nasty. You can sanction smaller countries, you can slap tariffs on weaker economies, but China is simply too big to sanction. If Washington goes nuclear with secondary tariffs, the blowback inside China will be legendary. Imagine US companies in Shanghai or Shenzhen suddenly getting hammered. Let's be honest, the whole cutting off Russian oil excuse was never about morality. It was about competition. Take away cheap Russian energy, and suddenly Chinese manufacturing costs more. But even that didn't work. Beijing still found ways to keep the machine running. And now, even US officials sound like they're defending China's oil purchases. The narrative has flipped. The trade war, it's no longer a battle, it's a performance. Here's the dirty little secret: tariffs aren't being paid by China. They're being paid by you, the American consumer, importers in the US, families in the Midwest buying groceries, farmers trying to buy new machinery. Tariffs are just a hidden tax. And that money, it flows straight to Washington. So when officials brag, the tariff system is working, what they really mean is, the government is making money off American workers while pretending to punish China. Before the trade war, China was America's golden customer. Beijing bought up to 35 million tons of US soybeans. That's billions in sales. But today, zero. Absolutely zero. China turned to Brazil. South America can meet demand overnight, and Beijing has stockpiled reserves for years. They don't need US soybeans anymore. The result? A total collapse in American soybean sales, from 10.6 million tons down to under 5 million. That's more than a 50% crash. Farmers are bleeding out. Machinery costs are up 30, 50, even 80% in some cases. Loans feel like casino bets. And the global market? Well, countries now see plenty of alternatives. Nobody needs US agriculture if BRICS can provide cheaper supply. Think about that. Decades of trade relationships gone in a flash. Now let's move to tech. Because this is where the real danger lies. Everyone's hyped about AI, right? But AI runs on semiconductors. And semiconductors depend on rare earths. Guess where most of that comes from? China. Since the so-called trade truce, China has actually ramped up exports of rare earths. Shipments to the US jumped 76% from May to June. That's good for now. But what happens if Beijing cuts supply tomorrow? What happens if those rare earths stop flowing to Arizona's chip factories or to Intel's production lines? Simple answer. US tech crashes. Fighter jets, electric cars, advanced AI chips, all of it grinds to a halt. So while Washington talks tough, the reality is this. They can't afford to anger Beijing too much, because one move from China and Silicon Valley collapses overnight. But let's add another layer of pressure: the US financial system. Yesterday the Nasdaq tanked over 2%. Tech stocks are stumbling. Why? Because the Federal Reserve is stuck, inflation is still high, jobs are weaker, and America's debt? It's climbing towards $38 trillion. If the Fed doesn't cut rates, borrowing costs soar. If they do cut, inflation spikes. Either way, US companies are squeezed. So combine this financial mess with dependency on Chinese rare earths, Chinese manufacturing, Chinese demand, suddenly you realize America is not holding the cards, Beijing is. And it's not just the US. Let's hop across the Pacific to Japan. Tokyo's exports are collapsing. The worst fall in 4 years. Auto parts, steel, cars, sound familiar? Those are exactly the sectors hit by Trump's tariffs. Imports are also down. Crude, coal, LNG, that means factories are producing less. Japan is losing its manufacturing edge, and with debt to GDP at 250%, they can't just borrow endlessly to stimulate growth. Their bond market is signaling danger. So what's left? One option, China. Just like India, Japan will eventually have to turn to Beijing for trade, for cooperation, for survival. And India, Trump thought sanctions would hurt New Delhi. Instead, Indian elites are laughing all the way to the bank. They profit from Russian oil, resell to other markets, and make billions. But long-term, India sees where the winds are blowing. Modi is already meeting with Chinese officials. More trade, more cooperation, and importantly, more transactions outside the US dollar. This is the real revolution, de-dollarization. Slowly, quietly, but steadily, America's financial dominance is being chipped away. So let's step back. What do we see? Russia bypassed sanctions, India profited, China expanded its influence, US farmers are collapsing, US tech is vulnerable, Japan is wobbling. Trump's trade war was supposed to reassert American power. Instead, it might be accelerating the end of US economic dominance. And here's the kicker. Trump is reshaping the global order, just not in the way he wanted. So the question is this: will Washington double down and hit China again with another round of tariffs, risking total economic blowback? Or will they quietly wave the white flag, as they already seem to be doing? And what about Japan? How long before Tokyo's leaders run straight into Beijing's arms, desperate to save their industries? The clock is ticking. What do you think? Is America playing a losing game here? Or can Washington somehow turn this trade war around? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. And guys, if you found this breakdown useful, do me a favor. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next deep dive. Because the global economy is shifting right in front of us, and you need to know exactly where it's heading. Stay safe, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.